Hi, my name is Joseph Musi. Today I'm going to make a video that has been on my heart for a long time, but as the days progress in this crazy world that we live in, I just felt more compelled to give you these 5 tips on how to defend yourself in any situation, okay? So that's what these tips are going to be. Some of them might seem obvious to you, but you'll see that what seems obvious may not always necessarily be something that is innate in you, okay? So one of the tips is going to be awareness. So first and foremost, we think about awareness and we go, yeah, I'm aware. I mean, I see what's around me. I can pretty much tell what's gonna go on. And the truth of the matter is, in my observation, in my life, I can tell you that I look and study people and I see that a lot of people just aren't aware. And especially in this day and age where everybody's carrying around their cell phones and people are just looking and talking and are oblivious to what's around them. And I see it every day, okay? Awareness is my number one tip, okay? In order to be able to defend yourself, in order for you to be able to even have a fighting chance to hopefully squelch or take care of the issue that might be coming up, the very first thing you need to do is be aware. You should be looking almost like a paranoid maniac, if you will, but you should be looking at your surroundings. You should be looking at the people that are around you, the things that are happening. And again, you're not going to be able to see everything at the same time, but it is your duty, it is your responsibility to make sure that you are aware of your surroundings. This way, when you see something that just seems a little unsavory, or you see something in the distance that's coming your way, or if you see something that is not turning out correct, you start to be aware of these things, you'll be able to, number one, avoid them. Okay? So awareness is my number one tip, and I can belabor that point a million different ways. But first and foremost, look, be aware, see your surroundings. That's my first tip. My second tip is readiness. Okay, so it kind of falls in hand with being aware. So being aware is you're looking, you're seeing, and you're getting kind of a lay of the land, you're getting a good landscape view of what your surroundings are. So readiness is, okay, well, now you've spotted everything and you might see something that's happening, or you might see a person or a group of people come in your direction, and something inside your gut says, uh-oh, there can be some trouble here, okay? So the second thing, and again, it kind of runs parallel with the first, but is readiness. Readiness, to be ready, to be prepared. And again, that's something that we all take for granted, especially in this fast-paced moving world where things are happening just as quickly as we can blink. Readiness is something that we should all have. So I'm going to put in my tips, number 2, readiness. And you're going to see that, again, this might sound obvious to you and it might sound easy, but the truth of the matter is that it isn't. And you have to train your mind. So I'm going to put as my number 2 tip, readiness. My number 3 tip is, we're assuming that you had the first 2 and now there's a confrontation and the moment has come. And now you're standing here with the person who may be the guy who knocks you out, who takes you out, who stabs you, shoots you, whatever the case is, but now you're face to face with this opponent, okay? Now, you were aware, you passed that phase, and your readiness allowed you to be in a position to do what it is that you need to do necessary. And like I said, things move so fast, and however we got here, or however it is that we got here. So now we're here and we're confronted with our opponent, okay? So even though this is the third tip, this third tip has many little tips within them, okay? So This is the third tip, but I'm going to say out of the third tip, the very first thing you want to do when someone is confronting you is to keep your distance. Again, this may sound obvious, but it isn't always obvious, okay? I've seen a zillion fights myself physically in the real world, and with the advent of YouTube, you can type in sucker punch, street fight, so whatever you want, and you will see that this is one of the things that people just don't do. And it may be something that, again, as I'm speaking to you, might sound like common sense, but it's something people don't do. So you want to make sure that you gauge a person, that you have the right space, okay? So when someone comes up into your space and this is where they came to, this is like red flag, okay? This is danger zone. Now, when I'm over here, where I'm kind of, let's say, at arms or legs length, this is a good safe place, okay? And first and foremost, you want to make sure that this spacing is available to you. So if you're feeling like this person is encroaching in your space, then you need to gauge and you need to make sure you create further space. Now, you always want to talk your way out of a fight because you don't want to be in a fight, okay? So I'm not advocating fighting. I'm advocating for you to be aware and ready, and if the situation arises where it's something that you just can't avoid, then be prepared to take care of business. And so that's what I'm saying here in this video. And like I said, we live in a crazy, crazy world, and it's been bothering me more and more, and it's been a huge burden in my heart. So I don't want to have to charge for anything that I believe that we should have readily accessible at our disposal. So space, okay? So now when I'm talking and I'm trying to avoid this confrontation, there comes a point in time that after you're verbalizing to this individual that you are not trying to engage in a fight, there comes a point where you understand that this person's either going to leave or this person is going to continue to pursue. And that's something we all have here in our gut. We know that something's ready to happen, or we were able to successfully disengage and that they were able to leave and you left unscathed and life was good. But this individual wants to pursue you. See, what he sees as you trying to squelch the matter, he might see it as empowerment to him. Ooh, I got this guy. He's moving back. He's scared. And he's going to try to impose his will on you. Okay, now this is very important because as you see next, I'm gonna walk you through a series of things that happen in order to invoke fear in you that can have dramatic and traumatic physiological effects in your body that will ultimately determine whether you do something or not. But I'll get to that in a second. So gauging your distance, keep your hands up in front of you. People think that they can keep their hand down here when the person comes up to them and they'll be able to react if they see them. And the truth of the matter is that is not the case. There are people who are so fast, and by the time your eye sees the movement and your brain is able to react to it, and then your body gets into play, you're knocked out. You find yourself in a hospital somewhere. So distance is something you want to make sure that you have. And I hate to beat a dead horse on this, and why I'm emphatic about it is because once you've done steps 1 and 2, and now we are at this point, this is very important for you to understand so that it can assure some sort of survival. So that's going to be my third, let's call it 3A. Okay, let's call this one 3B, okay? So now 3B is, this thing is gonna happen. You tried, you had your hands up, you kept your distance, but this guy is relentless. He has in his mind, he wants to hurt you. And so now there is no escaping it. This is going to happen. Okay. So now that being said, this is also very, very key. Okay. Now, remember, he believes that because he's imposing himself on you, that the fear of his imposition on you is overtaking you. Now, 99% of the time, that might actually be true because you let it go too far. And the subconscious mind is very weird. So even though this person might be even physically smaller than you, his mere words and his presence and his aura is exuding in such a way that you're feeling that weight, and it could psychologically end the fight for you. So one thing you want to make sure is that you keep assurance and you lock your eyes to his eyes. And when you lock your eyes to his eyes and your hands are up, the next thing, which I'm calling B, is the element of surprise. So this whole time he felt like he was empowered. He felt like he was running the show. He obviously came to you, confronted you, you tried to avoid it, your hands was up, you tried to get some distance, and he pursued it. So at this point, he's feeling a sense of bravado. He feels a momentum going here, and he feels he can now take care of business. So the element of surprise is that next tip. You see, the element of surprise is a little something like this. Okay, were you scared? Well, whether you were scared or not, something happened inside of you physiologically. And that is called fear, because the fear entered out of something that was unrecognizable. It was the element of surprise. So the element of surprise is very, very important, and it is key and crucial to any confrontation and fight. Now that can be a good thing and a bad thing, but we're hoping that we take it and we understand these little tips to be something that we can grow and use ultimately if need be. So we're at C now. We tried the element of surprise. We came in confrontation. We locked eyes, and we're now in this, and we've committed ourselves to this. So the very first thing you want to do, this thing is on, it's ready to rock and roll. So not only did the element of surprise happen perhaps in a non-physical way, whether it was motion, movement, but now it needs to happen in a physical way. So when I hit somebody, or when you hit somebody, you know, everybody always goes for the face. So you might get away with that, that's fine. But when two people are engaged in a fight, your adrenaline is pumping, your muscles are perplexed, and everything is in a ready state for fighting. And so you notice a lot of people can get hit severely in the face and survive the attack, okay? And that's because your eyes are seeing it. So your eyes see it and your body is ready to prepare for it. And for some dramatic reason or another, you're able to take or sustain the shot, sometimes. So I'm saying, let's do something that is beyond this. For me, there are beautiful body shots and beautiful pressure points, places that you can hit hard enough that can cause enough damage. And what you want to do in this case is to hit in a place that will cause the most amount of damage in the least amount of time. And then later on, if you want to go for the head, then that's totally fine. But if you are going to go for the head, you know, the ear is a good place. I mean, you smack somebody really hard with your palm in their ear and you totally break their equilibrium. So let's say I'm standing here, okay? And this guy is engaged and I see him, he's ready to move. We went through all of the previous steps and I had the element of surprise, and he either flinched or moved forward or whatever the case is. And if I want to use the head, then I might go something like boom, and I hit him in the ear, okay? So this is where most people fail, okay? So now I'm gonna go into, this is going to be number 4. So I want to transition quickly into number 4 because it's part of this one. So number 4 is you gotta be relentless, okay? So just like you would in your relationship, just like you would in your career, just like you would with, if you have kids, just like you would with anything you do, you don't want to do 0 to 20. You don't want to do 0 to 50. You want to do 0 to 100. You want to give it your all. You want to make sure you've committed every part of yourself in this. And if you're in the street, if you don't give your all, well, they certainly will. And again, it might be to your detriment. So again, I'm not advocating being wild and to hurt somebody severely or to go out there looking for fights. What I'm saying here, this whole thing is predicated on the fact that trouble has come to you. Okay, so this whole video is for your security. This is, again, based on the assumption that trouble has come to you. And you may not necessarily be a fighter. You may not even know anything about martial arts. You may not have ever had a fight in your life. And these things will still work. So I go in here, boom, and I just this is a total shock to his system, okay? His equilibrium is completely off. He's hearing bells right now, and the suction of my palm just going into these little bones, which are his eardrums, just totally just rips apart. So at that point is when you need to get what I'm gonna say, this is number 4, be relentless, okay? Now, when I say be relentless, it shouldn't be equated with being cruel, okay? So relentless is, I hit him, he's at a state of flux right now, and there might be a point in time where maybe his adrenaline truly rises because he never thought he would be in this situation, and he might get an extra burst of energy or enough burst of energy to come forward. So you gotta be relentless. So it doesn't just stop here. Maybe you take either your knuckles or your palms, and it only takes about 7 pounds of pressure to go from here, boom, to go here, to break his clavicle. So the reason why I would go for the clavicle is because the clavicle is a perfect bridge between your shoulder and your neck and the rest of your arm. So your whole arm from your shoulder down is basically hinged on this, your collarbone or your clavicle. If I break this bone, this arm sags completely down. But more than just sags, it's now rendered useless. Because once I broke this bone, and depending on the severity of it, I may have ripped some tendons and maybe some muscle. And of course, there's a lot of nerve endings here all together. And so this arm just drops, and it basically it's rendered useless, okay? Now at this point, between hitting him here, breaking his clavicle, and it may be an elbow, just now you can go, boom, an elbow, and put him out, and then you need to go, and you need to call 911 and let the cops know what just transpired, and stay there, because you were the victim in this case, okay? Even though you may have become the victor, you were still the victim, because none of this would have happened had they not entered your space. So you got to keep that in mind, okay? So again, you don't go out looking for trouble, but if trouble comes to you, you should be prepared. I believe everybody should be prepared, okay? So boom, boom, and maybe boom, okay? Now this is going to vary from person to person. There are some people who are just much more muscular. Some people are just much more prepared, much more athletic, and are much more tolerant to certain thresholds of pain. So there are other attacks that we can do, but that's something that you can look, go to my website, or just reach out to me. You can email me at jmusi@wingchunscience.com, and we can engage in some sort of dialogue there. But that being said, he is now rendered useless, and you have now utilized all the steps up until that point to make sure that you got this person who has confronted you, okay? This is the whole premise of this video, who has confronted you. Now, whether you are a martial artist or whether you are not a martial artist, whether you are a pacifist or someone who's more aggressive, this works for everybody, because that is the way every human being interacts with each other when it comes to this fight or flight situation. So the 5th tip here is, and I alluded to it in my 4th tip, at the end of my 4th tip. The 5th tip here is, don't go too far. Don't lose it. You want to try with every fiber of your being to try to take care of this tactfully, and that you do it in a way that you don't overexert yourself, but more importantly, that you don't tip over to the other side and become the animal that this person was when he confronted you. Remember, this is all about self-defense. This is about you being in a position or a situation where you were confronted. It wasn't something that you looked for. So remember, you don't want to go back a few steps and become this same animal that confronted you. Okay? You need to take care of business. Yes. Take care of it relentlessly. Yes. Make sure you do it tactfully. Yes. But once you've taken care of business, don't go stomping on him. Don't go hitting him with a brick or a bat. Don't go doing anything that, number one, goes beyond the realm of self-defense. At this point, he's basically defenseless. So there is no more self-defense here. Anything you do outside of that is brutality and is illegal. Okay? So those are my 5 tips. Now, I alluded to earlier that I was going to mention to you, or try to give you a quick synopsis of what the physiological effects are with regards to fear and how fear works in your life. So I'm going to take that moment right now. Okay, so before I show you anything here, I do want to inject something that I should have said or preface at the beginning of this video, is that you don't want to look at everything in terms of wins and losses. Because the truth of the matter is that you're going to have fights that you may lose. And you don't want to think losing as in terms of you got defeated. Okay? For me and for any, self-respecting human being, losing is more than that. You got into a fight, and one of you have to get hurt more than the other. One of you may have gotten knocked out, and that doesn't determine wins or losses, because someone can knock you out by accident. They didn't even know how it happened. It could have been something reckless. It could have been something you did that you didn't defend yourself with, and he got a lucky punch. So what I want to make sure that we term as wins and losses are emotional. It's more of the heart. So for me, a loss is when you have fear, when you didn't fight because you were fearful, when you didn't give it your all because you were fearful, when you avoided everything because you were fearful. Now, avoiding fights altogether is a great thing, but you don't want fear to be the main component or the main driver of why you didn't do something. So let's go real quickly and bear with me here, and let's look at the human brain. So, for example, you have the thalamus, which is responsible for sights and sounds. Okay, so that's very important, because I was talking to you earlier about how good it is or important it is for you to see your surroundings, hear your surroundings. Make sure basically you're imbibed and inculcated in the very corner of the street that you're standing, so that you can be aware. So the thalamus is responsible for sight and sounds. And then you have the cortex. Now the cortex is what actually gives the sights and sounds meaning. Okay, because sights and sound in itself are just very vague generalizations. There's sights and there's sounds, but what the cortex does, it gives sights and sounds meaning. Meaning, I see things that are very familiar to me, that I can associate things and remember, and so that gives it meaning. I hear things like a fire engine or a police car or scuffling or people yelling or screaming, and those sounds are what give meaning to the things that I hear and see. Then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is basically, it turns off the anxiety response. Okay, and that's key and crucial here, because if this thing is turning off the anxiety response, we want to make sure we understand what we're doing at the given moment. And then we have the amygdala. Okay, now this is primarily an emotional, basically it's the emotional part of the brain which triggers fear. So this is very important, because these things are happening almost in this sequential order, because we see things, we hear things, and that's through our thalamus, and then our cortex is what gives those things that we saw and heard the meaning. Then the prefrontal cortex is what turns off the anxiety response. The amygdala, again, is that part of the brain that triggers fear, okay? Then you have the locus coeruleus, which initiates anxiety response. For example, you'll feel things like rapid heartbeat, increased blood. You'll feel blood pressure. You'll be sweating more. Your pupils start dilating. So this is your locus coeruleus that initiates that anxiety response. Okay, again, these all take a huge part. These all have a specific key for fear, how you feel fear, how you get fearful, and how you react to fear. And then you have the hippocampus, which basically it serves as the data from your senses and all of the garbage from the amygdala. So the hippocampus is now kind of like that database of now trying to make sense of all of this stuff, all of these feelings, these senses, okay? You have the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands, which causes your adrenal gland to create high levels of cortisol to be made. Now, the cortisol levels are important because this is kind of like that fight or flight. This is what's now going to get your body prepared to either be scared or to do something, to react. And these cortisol levels, if you can imagine when you went on your first ride in Great Adventure or somewhere, and that sense of fear that was welling up in your stomach, it was a little bit of excitement, it was a little bit of fear, and your cortisol level rises in order to produce the hormones that are needed in order for you to deal with that in however way you deal with it. Again, all of the prerequisites I laid out already, like the thalamus, the cortex, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, locus coeruleus, hippocampus, and so on. So that's possibly, again, that's the next step in what's actually happening in your body. So a whole series of physiological things are happening at this point. Okay, when I say this point, I'm referring to the point where you are now being confronted by the person who is either bullying you, or the person who is trying to rob you, or the person who simply wants to have fun and beat you up. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about of what's happening physiologically at this point and preparing you to either fight or run. Okay, so now everything is getting ready, your body's getting ready, and all of these things are happening in milliseconds. Okay, so I'm explaining everything step by step about the physiological effects, but all of this is happening in fractions of seconds. Only after that whole biochemical chemistry starts to happen does the conscious mind kick in. Okay, so all of this that I just explained is happening right before the actual conscious mind kicks in. Okay, these things possibly happening trigger or strengthening the exact physiological process and causes more and more fear to become real to you. This process is what makes you fearful. Okay, so everything I just explained to you, and you can rewind this, you can take notes, you can go to a science class and see if I'm correct in this, go to a biology class, or whatever you want, type it in YouTube. This is all happening, all of this biochemical chemistry that's happening in your body in milliseconds are all happening at the moment this confrontation begins. So we learn fear, okay? Fear is a chemical response. If I go all the way back to the beginning of what I was talking about the thalamus and its sights and sounds, and then the cortex, which gives the sights and sound meaning, right there, the giving the sights and sound meaning, those are all things from movies that you saw, from listening and looking at the news, from seeing fights that you would never dare even enter, and just being bombarded in your brain and in your mind through your eyes and through your ears with all of the garbage, the noise that makes you fearful. So even though you may not have personally experienced any of these things, the fear has crept in through your visual and your audible senses. Okay, so now that we know that fear is something that can be learned, and unfortunately it's something that we learn from a very young age. You know, our parents try to help us by saying, don't do this, don't do that, be careful here, you're gonna hurt yourself. And they mean well, okay? And I have kids and I say that myself, but at the same time, what's happening is years of resistance, of building this fear, starts to well up in the eye's mind. And so the beauty is that you can undo and unlearn and reverse this quote unquote automatic response into something positive. And that's where I truly feel that everyone should learn some sort of self-defense. I believe that, again, we're living in some crazy, crazy times, and it's not a matter of winning or losing a fight. It's knowing in your heart of hearts that you don't have the fear in order to confront it when it happens. Again, I'm not advocating that you start trouble, and I'm not advocating that you go out and become the same wild animals that these guys are, but that when the time happens, if it happens, and hopefully never, but if it happens, that you'll be prepared, and that with all of these tips that I provided you today, you'll be able to be a little bit more self-assured. Now, my recommendation to you, and you know, my preference would be that you learn Wing Chun. Wing Chun is a very straightforward art. It's the art that I've been taking and doing pretty much my whole life. I'm 45 years old now, and it's the art that I stand by and that I love. But if Wing Chun is not your thing and you just simply want to start developing something that helps you get a little bit more acutely intimate with your own body, how it moves, how it functions, the musculature, I would recommend that you take some sort of art or some sort of self-defense class. But if you took nothing, even after this heartfelt advice, my recommendation to you is really listen to this video over again and study it. Just make sure you see that what I'm saying is accurate or inaccurate. And then when the time comes, if the time comes, that you'll see that you'll be a little bit more readily prepared for it, and that fear will not hold you. And that is, to me, the biggest thing everyone, I think, who is living should overcome is fear. Because it may not creep into you physically, into a physical altercation, but it may creep into your business world. It may creep into your academics. It may creep into your relationships, and fear can destroy all that. And so I'm trying to show you guys that fear is something that we can change biochemically in our own cells, physiologically, and that takes training in order for us to become optimal at the things that we do. So I wrote 2 books, and I would love for you to have them. If you download one of my books and pay the full price for it, you'll get the other one for free as a downloadable book. You don't have to take it. You can simply pass on that because I've already given you the information. But it is something that I highly recommend because I do go into some great detail about fear and the decision-making process in general. So I hope you liked this video. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Again, my name is Joseph Musey, and you can reach me at jmusey@wingchunscience.com. Thank you for your time.